Proverbs 13 tonight. Proverbs chapter number 13. And we'll just read probably the first. Micah, Swope, you have that pulled up? I'm going to have you read the first 4 or 5 verses. Read the first 5 verses tonight. And Proverbs 13, I'll have you read it. Go ahead.
Chapter 13, verse 1. A wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. A man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth, but the soul of the transgressors shall eat violence. He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, and he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction. The soul of the sluggard desireth to have nothing, but the soul of the diligent shall be made fat. A righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame.
All right, again, tonight as Mike read those verses, we see again that in verse number 2, verse number 3, Solomon again, as we've studied for the past few weeks or several weeks or several months even, as we've been studying this book of Proverbs, that there seems to be here lately, there seems to be one theme that Solomon is trying to get across to us, and that again is our speech, is our mouth, and what we say, what we do, how we can control. And I believe that for a reason. I believe that anytime we see something in the Bible that is spoken over and over, and you've heard me say this time and time again, and you don't need me to tell you this, I know you already know it, but when we see things like that in the Bible, we've got to understand that there's a reason why this is being repeated over and over and over again. And I truly believe that it's because of Solomon wanting to give us a warning, because our mouth is something that we can really get in trouble with, and there's a lot of things that can happen when we can't control our tongue and control our mouth and control our words. And it doesn't take any time at all for us as Christians to lose our testimony by our mouths and what we say. You can say something and you can apologize up and down until you're blue in the face, but you know what? Once you've said it, you can't take it back. And so I think Solomon is warning us about watching our mouths. Yes?
I just tweeted 2 people on Facebook today because of their language, and both of them proclaim to be Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not with that language. And it's out there
For everybody. Yep. And honestly, that's one reason I don't have Facebook. And so someone, you don't have Facebook? No, I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter. I don't have any of that. There's a lot of reasons, but the main reason is because I don't want to hear stuff like that. I don't want to see stuff like that. And if a person ain't got anything better to do but sit around and post things like that on Facebook all day, sounds to me like they need to spend some time in the Bible instead of being on the computer and bringing other people down and using things like that. But that's a prime example right there. If somebody claims to be a Christian and they're doing that, just like Sandy, that probably hurt their testimony so bad just seeing that. And I think you did the right thing taking them off your page. Yep. But I truly believe tonight that Solomon again in these verses that's what he's warning us to. So verse number 1 tells us this. It says a wise son heareth his father's instruction, but a scorner heareth not rebuke. I believe here that the writer is telling us simply that if we're going to be wise, if we're going to be a wise son, if we're going to be a wise daughter, if we want to be wise in our life, then we need to listen and follow the instruction, just like he says, of our Father or those that have authority over us. I grew up, and I'm proud to say it tonight, that I grew up in a Christian home, and I grew up in a preacher's house, and I could always count on, when it come to spiritual advice, I always knew that I could count on my mom, and I could always count on my dad to give me that advice that I needed. I knew that I could trust the advice that my mom gave me. I knew that I could trust the advice that my dad gave me, because I knew that the advice they were giving me was not only from the heart, but it was also from the Bible. And I thank God for that. And I knew, obviously I knew that I would be getting two kinds of instruction. As my father was a preacher, I knew I would get fatherly advice, but I also knew that I would get the instruction of a pastor as well. And but all the time growing up with mom and dad both, I knew that I could always count on them telling me and giving me good advice. And as a son, I could get all the advice that I need to get from my father, from my mother, from any Christian person, from a pastor or whatever. I can take all the advice that I want, but if I don't apply it, if I don't listen to them, if I don't do, what they're advising me to do, that's my fault. And I believe that if I didn't take the advice, if I didn't listen to somebody that knew, that had the answer, somebody older, somebody wiser, that may have already been down that path before, if I didn't listen to their advice, especially my father or my mother, Brother Gary, that makes me a fool. And I believe that's what the Bible calls it. And if we want to be wise, then we need not to be ashamed, to get advice from somebody, wise or somebody older. But we need to be able to, to put it to use and not just hear it, not let it go in one ear and let it go out the other ear. But also growing up, I believe that neither one of my parents wanted to see me, go down the wrong road. I know that with all my heart. But, I also believe that there was times when they let me make my own decisions. They let me make my mistakes so that I could learn from my mistakes. And what's that?
Those lessons last.
And those lessons sometimes those lessons are the hardest lessons in life to learn. And, I always think about it as doing something, and you learn it, and you learned it the hard way. You'll never do it again. And sometimes those lessons are the hardest ones to learn, but those are some of the lessons that that I really believe that we need to learn. But I also believe that my mom and dad were both spiritual enough, that I could count on them, that I knew that I could trust them for the instruction or the advice that they would give me. And, like I said, there's a lot of times that the advice that they give me that I wasn't very wise and I didn't listen to what they had to say. But I'm glad that I knew that I had Christian parents that could give me that advice, and I knew that I could trust them, and I knew that I could count on them too. So, anybody have anything to add on verse 1? Solomon is just telling us, hey, listen, if we want to be wise, a wise son, you'll listen to that instruction. But not just listen to it, but you'll take heed to what they're telling you. And if you listen to it and take heed, if the person's a spiritual person, if the person it's like you said, your father, I believe that could also be referencing our Heavenly Father, because that anything we need, any advice, any instruction, God wrote it out right here for us. And I believe that this is our roadmap, and I believe that, Brother Gary, here's the answers. If we can't find them through somebody else, through our own father, through, our somebody else spiritual or pastor or somebody like that, if we don't get what we need, right here is where we can find it as well. And I believe this is the greatest instruction manual that we can have. Yes, Mike?
The other flip side of it, where it's saying a scorner heareth not rebuke, is if you rebuke a wise man, he'll be wiser still. There's another correlated passage to that. Just because somebody doesn't instruct you nicely, you can be rebuked, and you need to learn how to take it and how to learn from it. I've had times when people have rebuked me and said, hey, what you did was wrong. And, it's like admitting they were wrong. You know what? Yeah, you're right. So it's a wise man will accept the rebuke even when it's given as rebuke. It doesn't have to be your father. Mm-hmm. It could be your children. They're great rebukers because they don't hold the double standard. If I tell them to do something and I don't do it, they rebuke me. Well, they're right.
Okay. Anybody else?
Along those exactly what he said is true because of our young walk in our Sunday school, lots picking us up, and our desire to be in Sunday school where we were loved, or Vacation Bible School. Our mom came to the Lord when we were teenagers because we were not afraid to be who we were in church once we came home from church anymore.
Yep. Yep, yes.
Scott, it's not funny, but right at work, we're into a session at work, and the store manager told us yesterday that this was not an option, that it was mandatory for us to take this. And this is what this is about, is how we treat people, how we treat our associates, how we treat our customers, reflects on our store.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you need to wear that every day.
And we're going to talk about that here in the next couple of verses, but she's right, not just your business, but you know what, that we can apply that to our own daily lives, because what people see here on the outside is what they're going to remember. And so we need to remember that in our everyday lives, not just in our companies, but as Christians, we're representing Christ, we're representing Faith Baptist Church. And I think we need to remember that. And I want to get to verse 2 tonight. I know it's pushing 8 o'clock. I think that clock's a little bit fast, so, well, maybe not. But anyway, we're going to try to do at least 2 more verses because these talk about the same thing here. Verse 2 says this. I shared this with Brother Gary last week. This was my favorite verse. One of them anyway. There was 3 of them I liked really good, but this was my favorite. It says, "A man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth, but the soul of the transgressors shall eat violence." Here again, as we were talking earlier, the writer is giving us instruction on our speech. And I don't know about you, but I love to talk to people who speak kind, good words. Isn't it amazing how much better that makes you feel when you're around somebody that that has nothing but good to say, somebody that offers up that spiritual advice, offers up the godly words, and not somebody that likes to argue, not somebody that likes to complain about everything and anything all day long. And I used to be one of those type of people. I really did. I used to be the type of person that, I did not eat good by the fruit of my mouth. Because I was the kind of person that no matter where I was at, no matter who I was with, no matter whether it was at work, no matter whether it was at a restaurant, no matter if it was in church, no matter where it was at school, it didn't matter. I always had a problem with my mouth. I never was the one that would hold anything back. I'd always just tell it like I thought it was, and I'll say this, there's a lot of people in your workplace. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I know this guy very well, and used to work with him. And he was the type of person, he was just like me, and he's still that way today. He's been with this company that he's with for about 25 years right now. And Brother Gary, he's still one of the low men on the totem pole. And it's because of his mouth. It's because of the way he talks to his boss. It's because of his actions at work. But he's not smart enough to figure that out. He'll call me every so often, and he'll say, "Well, I'm still down where I was at. They passed me over again for another promotion. I didn't get to do this. I didn't get to do that. They gave it to somebody else." And I keep telling him, I said, "Well, have you ever thought maybe it's you and the way that you handle yourself at work?" I said, "I haven't been around you at work for years and years. But I can tell you this, if you haven't changed any, since I've worked with you several years ago, then, I know why. I know what the problem is." But, he doesn't think that way, and he was right back at me the same way. He tore into me a little bit and told me I had no business telling him that. And I haven't seen him for years. He has no idea how he acts anymore, what he does. And before we got off the phone, I said, "Listen," I said, "that right there, if you're still talking to your bosses or your people that way, That's why, you're getting looked over for promotions. You may have all the talent in the world, may have all the credibility, and may have all the what it takes to do that job. But if people don't like you because of the way you speak, the way you talk, if they can't trust you to do the right thing in the right time, you're going to get passed over. And I believe that when he says a man shall eat good by the fruit of his mouth, I think what he's talking about there is simply this. When you speak to somebody and you speak those good words, you speak those kind words, you speak those words that that people want to hear, and it's from your heart, you're not just putting on a show. But I believe that what you're eating is what you're seeing in the other person's face. I believe that you're helping them. And I believe that you're going to get that in return. You're going to get the same thing in return. You're going to get, the gratitude back to you. They're going to tell you thank you. And that's going to be, food for your heart. That's going to be food for you for your thought, for you to think on. And what better way to go to sleep at night than knowing that you were able to help somebody with your words? I'm going to cry when I say this. My wife came home from work today, and she had gotten something in the mail today, and I didn't know what it was. I just laid it on the table. It was a little note, and she said, "Have you watered my flowers?" And I said, "No, not yet. I'll do it right now." And I was filling the water jug up to go out and water her flowers, and I look over at the table, and she's sitting there bawling her eyes out, and because of a little girl sitting in the back right there, Sierra. She sent my wife one of the kindest, most precious notes that my wife has ever received. And I hope you don't mind, but she made me read it. And it made me cry too. And my wife loves that little girl. But you made her day. And, she carried that letter around the house, and she read it I don't know how many times. And I know she stuck it in her purse because she's going to keep that there just as a reminder. So you never know with your words how you've helped somebody through the day. Somebody could be having the worst day of their life, and your kind words will help them get through another day. Anybody have anything on verse 2? Verse 3 is pretty much the same thing. It says, "He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction." Just talking about our speech again. Verses 2 and 3, we can kind of put them together tonight. But he's talking again about our speech. And it's, over and over and over again through this whole book of Proverbs, we've been reading about how important it is. And I know I sound like a broken record every week, but you know what? If Solomon is telling us that in every chapter, I'm going to tell you that in every chapter because I believe it's so important. Because I believe that, that we really do need to guard our tongues. We do need to guard our mouth. And I made some notes here. One writer said this when I was studying this today. One writer said that our choice of words, our tongue, our mouth, he said that our mouth, our tongue, our speech, life and death is in our tongue. And so if King Solomon said this again, that I believe that he's trying to tell us that we need to keep our attention focused on our speech. Why? Because that's how important it is. That's how important our words are. That our words are sharper than any two-edged sword could ever be. They can pierce deeper than any sword, any knife, anything. And another writer said this about our tongues. He says, our tongues. It says, can you rule your tongue to save your life, or does your tongue rule you? If our tongue rules us, then eventually that's like it says, it's going to bring destruction to us. It's eventually going to destroy us. And I like what another man said. He said that most people, and think about this for a minute, because if you really think about it, the majority of the time it's true. Most people that are famous, you get back to looking over some of our presidents and some of our, commanders in the army, some other famous people. What are they remembered most for? A lot of them are remembered for their words, a speech that they gave, or something that came out of their mouth, and I got to thinking about that today. You know what? How do we want to be remembered to somebody? Do we want to be remembered to somebody that's got, nothing good to say about anybody, that doesn't have anything kind to say ever? Or do we want to be remembered as somebody that speaks those good words, that speaks the kind? I don't know about you, but I want to be remembered and known as somebody that you can come talk to and know that I'm going to listen, and know that I'm going to pray for you, know that I'm going to say something back to you that's not going to be hurtful or offensive in any way, shape, or form, because that's not who I want to be. And I'll say this with our mouth, and I'm not bragging on myself, because I've already told you this is not the way that I used to be, and I've come a long way here in the last few years, but we had an incident not too long ago, and I could have handled it the right way, or I could have handled it the wrong way. And that verse says, "A man shall eat good by the words of his mouth." I could have very easily jumped on this person for not doing something, but I chose to make sure that I handled it the Christian way, and make sure I handled it the right way. And you know what? It worked out for me better in the long run, in the end, when I chose to do it the Christian way. And I want to encourage you to do that. My wife said to me, she said to me on the way home that night, she says, "I want you to know I'm proud of you." And I said, "For what?" She says, "The way you handled that situation, because," she says, "5 years ago, that's not who you were. You wouldn't have handled it that way." And I'll be honest with you, reading through this book of Proverbs and reading word for word everything that Solomon is telling us about guarding our mouths, guarding our tongues, that has helped me tremendously in my own personal life, because now I think twice before I open my mouth, before I say something. And I'm not perfect, just like none of the rest of us are. I have my days too, but when I get tired, when I get grouchy, is when I'm most vulnerable to popping off and saying things that we don't mean. And but you know what? Even through those times, it's still, to me, it's still not an excuse for what we say, because once we say it, we can't take it back. And even though we may not mean it, the person on the other end does not know that we didn't mean it. And sometimes it can ruin our credibility, and sometimes it can ruin our testimonies. And I truly believe that again, and I'm just reiterating this to you tonight, and I think we really need to be careful what we say, when we say it. We studied back in the book of Proverbs that a wise man, he says he'll think before he speaks. And I just want us to remember that tonight. And you say, why are we, why is this in the Bible? Well, because it's important. And why is it repeated so many times? Because it's important. And I think we just need to remember that each and every day of our lives. Just be careful and guard our tongues. Right back to that same old song that we sing. We sang it in Bible school. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. Be careful, little mouth, what you say. And, today, I'll give you this example, then we'll close. I was coming down Grand Central Avenue down there by Horner and Harrison, down by that way, across from Kentucky Fried Chicken. And somebody sideswiped me and hit the vehicle. And I wasn't for sure that that's what happened. I drove about 50 feet down the road, and hey, somebody hit me. Felt like it anyway. So, I pulled over off the side of the road. If you look at the car, there's not that much wrong with it. It's scuffed up and bumpers cracked on a little bit. But you know what? I could have jumped out and very easily jumped all over that guy. And in my younger years, I probably would have. But, I got out, looked at it, and the guy came up to me, was very nice, and apologized up one side and down the other. And we stood there, shook hands, and talked, pulled the cars off the road, stood there and talked. And in my old days, I wouldn't have been, I couldn't stand here and tell you that I would have been that way. But, with God's help and, prayer every day of my life, I pray that God watches me and guards my words and doesn't put me in any situation that'll ruin my testimony. And I think about that all the time now. And you know what? And Margie, tonight I met Margie's sister in a Dollar store. And we were in line. She was right in front of me. And I'm telling you this because you just never know. She started to talk to me. And, it would have been very easy for me to snub her, to very much easy me just to, well, whatever. But we struck up a conversation. I had no idea that was Margie's sister. Had I said something or snubbed her or done something in any way, shape, or form to offend her, you know what? She's going right there. If she knew who I was, she was going to go tell Margie. What kind of testimony? But you know what? Through her words and through my words, we were able to communicate to each other in a very Christian manner. Found out where she goes to church. Found out what their church is doing to help the flood victims down in the southern part of the state. And you know what? I had a nice conversation. And those are the kinds of conversations we can have and should have and need to have as Christians, just guarding our tongues. So, all right, well, let's stand and be dismissed in prayer tonight. And I'd like to ask